The first decade of the new millennium brought with it a ton of unique challenges for gamers. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 problems only 2000s gamers faced. Starting off at number 10, it is not having an HD TV. Now, HD TV was like mainly 720p back then, so it wasn't really particularly great. But the difference between, say, 720p and 4K is nothing like the difference between a CRTV and an HD TV. Like, not that CRTVs don't have their own type of charm. There's a reason why a lot of emulated games are trying to simulate what they looked like. They did have a very specific and unique look, but when everyone moved to HD TVs and you couldn't necessarily afford one, going to a friend's house that had one and then coming back to play games on your low-resolution square, oh, did that ever suck. The thing that sucked more, too, was if you had like a bigger CRTV, it was 10 times more obvious. Even if you had a widescreen CRTV, which did exist, by the way. It's just that most games did not support them, so that was never a particularly coveted type of television. But as soon as those HD TVs hit, we were like, what can I do to have one? At number 9 is terrible PC ports, like tons of games that had both console and PC releases. Yeah, the PC release would like basically be an entirely different game. And nowadays, obviously, the PC is miles ahead of consoles and oftentimes where the game looks the best. It was not the case back then. It was often like really just the inferior platform. It was kind of astounding how bad games could look on the PC when you consider what the PC is now. Some particularly notable ones include like Spider-Man 2, obviously not a game that looks even close to how the more recent Spider-Man games look, but that game looked like trash and ran like trash on the computer. Battle for Bikini Bottom was a big problem. Yes, that game is fun. No, it did not look good on the PC. And there are a ton of like tie-in type games. Grand Theft Auto 4 as well, honestly. Grand Theft Auto 4 was terrible on PC, and that was fairly late in the decade when PCs were even starting to get better. Still bad. At number 8 was trying to run Crysis with ultra settings on your PC. Now, again, we're talking about the tail half of the decade, but still. Crysis was a game that basically made a lot of people throw out their old computer and build an entirely new one, specifically so that Crysis would run badass on it. Because if a computer could run Crysis, it could run anything. Crysis also coincided with a sort of generational shift in PC graphics cards. In fact, Crysis is actually a year older than Grand Theft Auto 4, and the evidence that the hardware was changing so quickly is that Crysis was the benchmark. Grand Theft Auto 4 had been in the works for quite a while, obviously, but let's just be completely clear. If you weren't running Grand Theft Auto 4 at high settings, you were not running Crysis at ultra settings. In fact, for years, even still, when you do a custom PC rig, you can expect somebody to say, but can it run Crysis? Even though, like, if you built it today, yes, it obviously can run Crysis. At number 7, Steam used to really suck. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but Steam was horrible when it launched. It launched way back in 2003, and if you know what Uplay is like now, that's basically what it felt like back then. Steam was mandatory if you wanted to buy Half-Life 2, and not only was this dumb, cumbersome program attached to it, but it also couldn't handle all of the purchases. The servers that Valve set up for Steam just could not handle the number of people that wanted to play the game. And might I add, this was a single-player game in the year 2004. Back in 2004, people were outright angry that they needed to be connected online in order to play a single-player game, which, I mean, that's something that pisses me off now in 2021. This was in 2004 when that was just unheard of, and it didn't work. Not to mention how clunky and awful Steam's interface was back then. Slow, it detracted from the resources that you needed to play the game. It's just bad. It was basically just DRM. At number 6 is building your own PC. Now, as you know, building your own PC is a project now. Even now, when they build parts specifically knowing that people will be building a PC to do high-end gaming on. I'm not saying it was ever totally impossible or never not doable. I'm not saying that people have it easy now. I'm not saying that it was impossible then. However, it was a lot harder. You just had less resources, a lot less people had published build guides. You don't have the kind of communities that you have where people have done lots of testing and make recommendations to people. And you did not have all the same kinds of resources in terms of easily ordering and quickly getting parts that we're talking about. You could order them, but it would take a long time to get a hold of them, or you would have to go to various electronics stores that flat out don't exist anymore. Like, Circuit City or whatever. Micro Center's still around, but that could end up taking your whole afternoon, and that's assuming that these stores had everything that you wanted in stock. Sometimes they would have to order them as well. And if ordering was involved back at this time, ordering meant weeks, not days. Now it's something we can do a lot quicker and have a little bit more guiding information. Again, I don't want to call it easy now or impossible back then, because I don't want to sound like one of those old people being like, we had it so hard way back. But it's definitely a different experience. At number 5, this was the era before cloud saves. Not having cloud saves sucks. Let me just say, out of all of the developments in gaming, cloud saves is probably one of my favorites. Yes, the cloud does come with its own sort of weird set of privacy issues and problems, but we're talking about an era where memory cards were a thing. Do you know how many memory cards I have lost? And those things were not cheap. They were not cheap at all. I remember losing a memory card and not only being pissed off I had to start my progress over again, but also had to spend $30 on a new memory card. So you end up deleting a sibling's game file so you can save your game, and it pisses them off. Or they do that very same thing to you, and, well, you're the butt of that cruel cosmic joke. Another fun one is when you take your memory card over to your friends and the friend just stupidly saves over your save, and you don't even realize it till you get home, and it's like, I have to friggin' start Jedi power battles all over. Or hell, somehow something gets corrupted and there's just no way to come back to it. Even when they moved saves onto hard drives, that didn't fix the problem. We dealt with a lot of corrupted saves just because, well, that kind of media just isn't invincible. And to be truthful, neither is the cloud. I'm not gonna sit here and claim that the cloud solves every single problem. Again, like I said, there are privacy issues as well. But let me tell you, since cloud saves have been a thing, I have experienced so many less issues on that front. At number 4 is running wires for early online console gaming because Wi-Fi was not a thing yet. Okay, so if you have ever put together any kind of wired entertainment system in your house, any of them at all, you know that even a single wire is a huge pain. But while we're on that, wired controllers as well. I'm not saying that wired controllers are completely dead now. I have one for my PC actually for games that I intend to play on the PC with a controller. But wow, there is no game console I want to use a wired controller on ever again. It is just the most inconvenient thing. Generally, none of the wires were long enough for sitting on the couch. You had to sit on the floor up near the console itself, which makes it just hell on your back after a little while. I know that sounds like an old person thing to say, but I was not old in the 2000s, and yet, hurt my back. Hell, that crap hurt when I was playing in the late 80s with a wired controller that was 5 feet long. How long were the NES controller wires? That's a problem that I am so glad is gone. At number 3 is terrible internet connections, all right? So broadband internet wasn't mainstream until the late 2000s, with half of internet users having broadband by 2007. In the early 2000s, you were still playing online games on a dial-up connection. And a lot of people, to be completely clear, in the United States, where internet infrastructure is actually not among the best in the world, despite the fact that most of the companies are here, a lot of people still are. So for a lot of gamers out in Appalachia, like that is still a problem. But luckily for a lot of us, it's a problem that is confined to the past. I could never go back to 56K for gaming. Holy crap. No, absolutely not. At number 2, downloading patch files manually. Like nowadays, when you get on to Steam, it's like, all right, you got these patches, let's install them. It's the same thing for all console gaming. Patches are not a problem. They download. It's kind of irritating, but it's not really a thing. Back in the day, because people were spending so much on web hosting and stuff like that, oftentimes patch files would be distributed through like sketchy file hosts, and not everybody knew exactly where to get them from. And you could accidentally download like tampered patch files. You might get a virus, yes, from game patches. Hell, you could just download the wrong file and it would take a while because, like I said, the internet connections were much more bad. And sometimes you'd even have to search for them if the game wasn't like a huge mainstream AAA title. Genuinely, like this was a situation that was almost bizarre when you think about how easy it is to patch a game nowadays. It's literally nothing. And finally, this is one that I feel like has totally disappeared entirely. It's the rental store not having the game that you want. Like, we're not even buying games in stores for the most part now. We are downloading them off of the internet directly onto our game consoles and computers. GameStop has kind of lucked out with the whole stock market thing, but they're trying to figure out what on earth to even do for the next several decades to still exist. We're talking like Blockbuster though, or your local rental place, which that does not exist anymore. You do not need to go into a rental place to see a movie, for instance. That crap is on Netflix. They're launching movies simultaneously in theaters and on streaming services now. But way back then, if you wanted to try a game before you bought it, you had to rent it. And for you to rent it, the rental store had to be up on what games are coming out. Do you know how many times as a kid I called a rental store to find out if they had a new game? Because I didn't actually have a Blockbuster anywhere near me because I lived in a rural area. I mean, we eventually had a Blockbuster, but that stuff fell apart anyway, so it doesn't even really matter. Point is, you could waste tons and tons of time just waiting for the rental guy to understand that people want something. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Do not forget to enable all notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.